At 78, my daughter-in-law whispered, "Finally, we're going to inherit your 15 million old woman," as she served me tea. I smiled and said, "What a shame I switched our cups." 5 minutes later, she collapsed to the floor. Listen to my story until the end and comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Eleanor Whitmore and I am 78 years old. Everything started on that cold October evening when my family gathered for what would become the most extraordinary dinner of my life. The dining room was filled with the usual suspects that evening. My son Marcus sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain his composure as always, while his wife Victoria smiled that peculiar smile of hers that never quite reached her eyes. Their twin daughters, Sarah and Emma, both 25 now, whispered among themselves at the far end of the table. My younger son David had arrived late as usual, accompanied by his girlfriend Rebecca, a sweet girl who always seemed nervous around our family gatherings. I had prepared my famous roast with all the traditional accompaniments, though at my age the task had become increasingly challenging. Victoria had offered to help, which surprised me given our complicated relationship over the years. She had married my eldest son 15 years ago, and from the very beginning I sensed something calculating about her demeanor. Perhaps it was a mother's intuition, or perhaps it was simply the way she looked at our family home with appraising eyes, as if she were already mentally redecorating. The conversation flowed, as it always did during these gatherings, touching on work, the weather, and various family matters. Marcus discussed his law practice, while David talked about his struggling art career. The twins chatted about their respective jobs in marketing and teaching. Victoria contributed little to the conversation, instead focusing intently on serving tea from the ornate silver service that had belonged to my grandmother. As the evening progressed, I noticed Victoria's behavior becoming increasingly peculiar. She kept glancing at the grandfather clock in the corner, and her hands seemed to tremble slightly as she poured the tea. When she handed me my cup, our eyes met for just a moment, and I saw something there that made my blood run cold. It was anticipation, mixed with something darker, something that reminded me of a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The tea tasted slightly different that evening, though I couldn't quite place what was wrong with it. There was a bitter undertone that hadn't been there before, something metallic and unpleasant that made me hesitate before taking another sip. Victoria watched me intently, her eyes never leaving my face, as I lifted the delicate china cup to my lips. It was then that she excused herself to use the bathroom, but not before leaning close to my ear and whispering those chilling words. "Finally, we're going to inherit your $15 million, you old bat." Her voice was barely audible, but the malice in it was unmistakable. The shock of her words hit me like a physical blow, but years of experience had taught me to maintain my composure in difficult situations. My mind raced as I processed what I had just heard. Victoria believed I was about to die, and she was celebrating the prospect of inheriting my fortune. The bitter taste in my tea suddenly made perfect sense, and I realized with crystal clarity that my daughter-in-law had just attempted to poison me. The irony was not lost on me that she had chosen tea, my favorite beverage, as the delivery method for what she undoubtedly hoped would be my final drink. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. While Victoria was away from the table, I quickly and quietly switched our teacups, placing hers in front of my seat and moving mine to her place. The switch was seamless, aided by the fact that the rest of the family was engaged in animated conversation about Sarah's recent promotion at work. When Victoria returned from the bathroom, she looked refreshed and confident, settling back into her chair with what appeared to be barely contained excitement. She picked up what she believed to be her own cup of tea and took a large, satisfied sip, never realizing that she had just consumed whatever poison she had intended for me. I smiled at her sweetly and said, "What a pity that I switched our cups while you were in the bathroom, dear." The color drained from her face instantly, and I watched as the full implications of what I had said registered in her mind. Her eyes widened with terror, and she began to frantically feel around her throat and chest, as if she could somehow stop what was already happening inside her body. The next 5 minutes were the longest of my life. Victoria began to show signs of distress, clutching her stomach and breathing heavily. Her face grew pale, and beads of perspiration formed on her forehead. Marcus immediately rushed to her side, asking what was wrong, while David called for an ambulance. The twins stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening to their stepmother right before their eyes. Victoria tried to speak, to tell them what she had done, but the words came out as incoherent whispers and gasps. She kept looking at me with a mixture of terror and disbelief, as if she couldn't believe that I had outwitted her so completely. Finally, she collapsed to the floor, convulsing briefly before becoming still. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. Victoria was pronounced dead at the scene, and suddenly my quiet family dinner had become a crime scene. The police arrived shortly after, asking questions and taking statements from everyone present. I told them exactly what had happened, explaining how Victoria had whispered her confession to me and how I had switched our cups in response to her threat. The investigation that followed was thorough and revealed the full extent of Victoria's plan. A search of her purse uncovered a small vial that had contained rat poison, confirming my suspicions about what she had put in my tea. Her laptop revealed extensive research about various poisons and their effects, as well as detailed financial documents showing that she'd been tracking my assets for years. What shocked the family most was the discovery of Victoria's affair with her personal trainer, a young man named Jake Morrison, who had apparently been pressuring her to find a way to access my money quickly. Their text messages revealed a cold-blooded plan to eliminate me and make it look like a natural death, given my advanced age. Victoria had been convinced that my death would be attributed to heart failure or some other age-related condition, and that no one would think to test for poison. The twins were devastated to learn the truth about their stepmother, struggling to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the calculating killer she had revealed herself to be. Marcus was perhaps hit the hardest, realizing that his wife of 15 years had been planning to murder his mother for financial gain. He told me later that he had noticed changes in Victoria's behavior over recent months, but had attributed them to stress from her job rather than homicidal intentions. David's girlfriend, Rebecca, proved to be unexpectedly supportive during this difficult time, helping to coordinate meals and providing emotional support to the family as we processed the shocking events. Her calm presence was a welcome contrast to the chaos and grief that surrounded us in the weeks following Victoria's death. The media attention was intense but brief, with local newspapers running headlines about the teacup killer and the inheritance murder plot. I found myself thrust into an unwanted spotlight, having to relive the events of that terrible evening over and over again for reporters and investigators. The story seemed to capture the public imagination, perhaps because it involved elements that felt both familiar and shocking. A family dinner, a beloved elderly woman, and a greedy relative with murderous intentions. Jake Morrison was arrested as an accessory to attempted murder, though the charges were eventually reduced, since Victoria's death meant that he couldn't be held fully responsible for her actions. During his trial, it was revealed that he had been manipulating Victoria for months, convincing her that killing me was the only way they could be together without financial worries. He received a sentence of 8 years in prison, though I suspect he'll be eligible for parole much sooner. The psychological impact on my family was profound and long-lasting. Marcus entered therapy to help him process the betrayal and guilt he felt about not recognizing his wife's true nature. The twins struggled with trust issues, finding it difficult to form new relationships when someone so close to them had proven capable of such deception. David threw himself into his art with renewed intensity, creating a series of paintings that dealt with themes of family, betrayal, and survival. For my part, I found myself changed by the experience in ways I hadn't expected. The knowledge that someone had wanted me dead was disturbing enough, but the realization that I had been living under the same roof as a potential killer for years was deeply unsettling. I began to question my judgment about people and wondered how many other signals I might have missed over the years. The financial aspects of the situation were complex and emotionally charged. Victoria's death meant that her share of Marcus's eventual inheritance would go to the twins instead, but the money felt tainted by the circumstances of how it had been secured. I decided to establish a trust fund that would provide for my family's needs, while also supporting various charitable causes that had been important to me throughout my life. One of the most unexpected consequences of the entire ordeal was how it brought my family closer together. The shock of nearly losing me, combined with the revelation of Victoria's true character, seemed to strip away many of the petty grievances and minor conflicts that had characterized our relationships for years. We began to appreciate each other more deeply and to recognize how precious our time together truly was. Rebecca officially became part of our family when David proposed to her 6 months after Victoria's death. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair that focused on love and commitment rather than the elaborate displays that had characterized Victoria's approach to family events. It was a healing experience for all of us, representing hope and new beginnings after such a dark chapter in our lives. The twins both made significant changes in their careers following the incident. Sarah left her corporate marketing job to become a social worker, saying that the experience had taught her the importance of helping people rather than just making money. Emma decided to pursue a master's degree in psychology, hoping to understand the kind of mental processes that could lead someone to attempt murder for financial gain. Marcus eventually began dating again, though it took him nearly 2 years to feel ready for a new relationship. He chose more carefully this time, taking things slowly and involving the family in getting to know his new partner. The woman he eventually married, Helen, was a widow herself and understood the complexities of blending families and dealing with past traumas. The house itself seemed different after that night, as if the very walls had absorbed some of the tension and fear from those terrible moments. I considered moving to a smaller place, but ultimately decided to stay, feeling that running away would give Victoria's memory more power over me than it deserved. Instead, I redecorated the dining room completely, replacing the table where that fateful dinner had taken place and choosing brighter, more cheerful colors for the walls. I also made changes to my daily routines, particularly around tea time. For months after the incident, I couldn't bring myself to drink tea at all, the memory of that bitter taste too fresh and frightening. When I eventually began drinking it again, I always prepared it myself, never accepting a cup from anyone else. It was a small concession to paranoia, but one that helped me feel more secure in my own home. The legal proceedings dragged on for over a year, with various hearings and depositions that forced me to relive that evening repeatedly. Each time I had to tell the story, I noticed new details that I hadn't remembered before, small moments and observations that took on new significance in light of what I now knew about Victoria's intentions. The prosecutor told me that my quick thinking and decisive action had not only saved my own life, but had also provided crucial evidence that helped them understand the full scope of the conspiracy. One of the most disturbing revelations came when investigators discovered that Victoria had been slowly poisoning me for weeks before that final dinner, using small amounts of various substances that were causing the fatigue and digestive issues I had attributed to aging. Blood tests revealed traces of several different toxins in my system, suggesting that she had been experimenting with different approaches before settling on the rat poison as her method of choice. This discovery led to a complete review of my medical records and a series of tests to determine whether there had been any permanent damage from the prolonged exposure to these substances. Fortunately, my doctors determined that my body had been successfully processing and eliminating most of the toxins. though they warned that continued exposure would likely have been fatal even without the final concentrated dose Victoria had planned for that evening. The twins struggled particularly with this information, realizing that they had been unknowingly complicit in their grandmother's slow murder by bringing Victoria tea and meals that contained these hidden poisons. They blamed themselves for not noticing that something was wrong, though I assured them repeatedly that Victoria had been incredibly clever in covering her tracks and that even medical professionals hadn't suspected anything was amiss. As time passed, I began to see the entire experience as a strange gift in disguise. The knowledge that someone had tried to kill me for my money had forced me to confront my own mortality and to think seriously about what I wanted to do with the time I had left. I became more adventurous, taking trips I had always postponed and trying activities I had never considered before. I also became more involved in my community, volunteering at a local shelter for victims of domestic violence and contributing to programs that helped elderly people protect themselves from financial exploitation. My story had apparently resonated with many people who had experienced similar situations with greedy relatives or caregivers, and I found myself becoming an inadvertent spokesperson for elder protection issues. The anniversary of that terrible dinner became a day of reflection and gratitude for our family. Rather than trying to forget what had happened, we decided to acknowledge it as the day when we learned how much we truly meant to each other. We established a tradition of having a special dinner together on that date each year, always prepared collectively and always featuring tea that we each prepared for ourselves. Marcus told me once that he had learned more about courage from watching me handle that crisis than from any other experience in his life. He said that seeing me remain calm and take decisive action in such a terrifying situation had taught him that strength could come from unexpected places and that wisdom often mattered more than physical power when facing a threat. David created a painting based on that evening that now hangs in my living room. It's an abstract piece that captures the emotions of the moment rather than the literal events, with swirling dark colors gradually giving way to lighter shades that suggest hope and survival. Looking at it reminds me not just of how close I came to death, but of how much life I still had ahead of me. The experience also changed my perspective on wealth and inheritance. I realized that my money had been a source of temptation and corruption for Victoria, turning her into someone capable of murder. This led me to be more transparent with my family about my financial situation and my plans for the future, removing some of the mystery and speculation that might tempt others to take drastic action. I established a family foundation that would begin distributing funds immediately, rather than waiting until after my death, allowing me to see the positive impact of my wealth while I was still alive to enjoy it. This approach also meant that future potential gold diggers would know exactly what they could expect to inherit, removing the inflated expectations that had apparently motivated Victoria's extreme actions. The twins both became involved in managing the foundation, learning valuable lessons about money management and charitable giving that I hoped would serve them well throughout their lives. They seemed to understand that wealth carried responsibilities as well as privileges, and they approached their roles with maturity and thoughtfulness that made me proud. Rebecca proved to be a valuable addition to the Foundation's work, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative ideas about how to maximize the impact of our charitable giving. Her background in social services helped us identify programs and organizations that were making real differences in people's lives, ensuring that our money was being used effectively rather than simply being thrown at problems without careful consideration. Helen, Marcus's new wife, also contributed her expertise in education to help us develop scholarship programs for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Her experience as a teacher gave her insights into the challenges facing young people today and helped us create programs that addressed real needs rather than just providing token assistance. As I reflect on everything that happened, I'm struck by how a single moment of clear thinking and decisive action changed not just my own fate, but the trajectory of my entire family. If I had simply accepted what was happening and drunk that poisoned tea, Victoria would have gotten away with murder, and my family would have been left to mourn what they believed was my natural death. Instead, my survival exposed her true nature and saved them from years of living under the influence of someone who was fundamentally dishonest and dangerous. The twins would have grown up with her as a role model, potentially learning that manipulation and greed were acceptable ways to get what you wanted in life. Marcus would have remained married to someone who had murdered his mother, though he never would have known it. The ripple effects of that evening continued to unfold in unexpected ways for years afterward. Jake Morrison's trial attracted attention from other law enforcement agencies, leading to investigations that uncovered similar schemes in other parts of the country. It turned out that the slow poisoning approach Victoria had used was more common than anyone had realized, and several other suspicious deaths were reopened for investigation based on what had been learned from our case. I testified in 2 of these other cases, sharing what I had learned about the warning signs that might indicate someone is being slowly poisoned. The experience was emotionally difficult, but also rewarding, knowing that my ordeal might help prevent other families from going through similar traumas. One of the cases resulted in a conviction, bringing closure to a family that had been wondering for years why their elderly father had seemed to decline so rapidly before his death. The psychological evaluation of Victoria that was conducted posthumously revealed a complex personality disorder that had likely been developing for years before she met Marcus. Her childhood had been marked by financial instability, and parents who had taught her that money was the most important thing in life, more valuable than relationships or personal integrity. This background didn't excuse her actions, but it helped explain how someone could develop the mindset necessary to plan and attempt murder. Marcus found this information both helpful and disturbing, as it forced him to confront the possibility that he had never really known his wife at all. He had fallen in love with the persona she had created to attract him, while her true self remained hidden beneath layers of deception and carefully constructed lies. The realization that their entire marriage had been built on false foundations was perhaps more painful than losing her to death. The twins had their own struggles with this revelation, as they tried to sort through their memories of Victoria to determine which moments had been genuine and which had been calculated performances designed to maintain her cover. They both entered therapy to help them process these complex emotions and to learn how to trust their own judgment about people in the future. For David, the entire experience served as inspiration for a series of artistic works that explored themes of deception, family dynamics, and the masks people wear to hide their true intentions. His art became darker and more complex after Victoria's death, but also more powerful and emotionally resonant. Several galleries began showing interest in his work, leading to his first major exhibition, and finally providing him with the financial stability he had been seeking for years. Rebecca's response to the crisis convinced David that she was someone he could depend on in difficult times, leading to their engagement and eventual marriage. Their relationship deepened significantly during the months following Victoria's death, as they supported each other through the legal proceedings and media attention. Rebecca told me later that seeing how David's family rallied around each other during the crisis had convinced her that she wanted to be part of such a close-knit group. The house that had been the scene of such drama gradually returned to being a place of warmth and hospitality, though it took time to shake off the shadow of that terrible evening. I made it a point to host regular family gatherings there, creating new memories that would eventually overshadow the traumatic ones. The dining room where Victoria had collapsed was completely renovated, with new furniture, paint, and decorations that gave it an entirely different feel. I also began hosting book clubs and garden parties for my friends, filling the house with laughter and conversation that helped dispel any lingering negative energy from that night. These social gatherings became increasingly important to me as I realized how precious human connections truly were, and how easily they could be lost or corrupted by greed and selfishness. One of the most unexpected outcomes of the entire ordeal was the way it strengthened my relationship with my grandchildren. The twins had always been somewhat distant with me, caught up in their own lives and careers, but the shock of nearly losing me made them realize how much our relationship meant to them. They began visiting more frequently and calling regularly to check on my well-being. Sarah started a tradition of cooking dinner for me once a week, using recipes that had been passed down through our family for generations. These cooking sessions became precious opportunities for us to talk about family history and for me to share stories about their father and uncle when they were young. Sarah told me that these conversations helped her understand her own identity better and gave her a stronger sense of connection to our family's heritage. Emma approached our renewed relationship from a different angle, becoming interested in documenting our family's history through photographs and written accounts. She began interviewing relatives and family friends, collecting stories and memories that might otherwise be lost over time. Her project grew into a comprehensive family history that included not just the positive aspects of our past, but also the challenges and struggles that had shaped us as a family. The financial investigation that followed Victoria's death revealed just how extensively she had been planning her crime. Bank records showed that she had been quietly accumulating debts based on her expectation of inheriting my money, including loans secured against future assets and credit cards that she had been using to maintain her lifestyle while waiting for her plan to come to fruition. This discovery led to additional legal complications as creditors attempted to collect on these debts from Victoria's estate, which consisted primarily of personal belongings and a small savings account. Marcus found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to deal with his deceased wife's financial irresponsibility, while also processing the emotional trauma of learning about her murderous intentions. The stress of handling these financial matters, combined with the ongoing legal proceedings and media attention, took a significant toll on Marcus's health. He began experiencing anxiety attacks and had difficulty sleeping, leading his doctor to prescribe medication and recommend therapy. The experience taught him valuable lessons about the importance of mental health care and self-care during times of crisis. Helen's presence in Marcus's life became increasingly important as he worked through these challenges. Her calm demeanor and practical approach to problem-solving provided a stabilizing influence that helped him navigate the complex emotional and legal landscape he was facing. Their relationship developed slowly and carefully, with both of them aware of the need to build trust gradually after such a devastating betrayal. The twins also benefited from Helen's presence in the family, as she brought a maternal warmth that had been missing since Victoria's death revealed her true nature. Helen had children from her first marriage who were similar in age to Sarah and Emma, and the blending of these two families created new relationships and support systems that enriched everyone's lives. As the years passed, the dramatic events of that October evening began to take on a different significance for our family. What had initially been a source of trauma and division gradually became a reminder of our resilience and our ability to support each other through even the most difficult circumstances. We learned that families could survive almost anything if they were willing to face the truth and work together toward healing. I often think about what would have happened if I hadn't been quick-thinking enough to switch those teacups, or if I'd been too shocked by Victoria's whispered confession to take decisive action. The alternative timeline in which she succeeded in her plan is too disturbing to contemplate for very long, but it serves as a reminder of how quickly life can change and how important it is to trust one's instincts when something feels wrong. The experience also taught me valuable lessons about the importance of being observant and trusting my intuition about people's motivations and character. I had sensed something unsettling about Victoria from the beginning of her relationship with Marcus, but I had dismissed these feelings as normal, maternal protectiveness rather than legitimate concerns about her character. Looking back, I can identify several red flags that I should have taken more seriously. Her excessive interest in my financial situation, her tendency to ask probing questions about my health and medical care, and her subtle attempts to isolate me from other family members and friends. These warning signs might have seemed innocent individually, but together they painted a picture of someone who was carefully positioning herself to take advantage of my vulnerability. This recognition led me to become more vocal about sharing these observations with other elderly people in my community, hoping to help them protect themselves from similar predators. I began speaking at senior centers and community organizations about financial exploitation and the warning signs that might indicate someone has ulterior motives for befriending or marrying an older person. The foundation that I established with my family's help has grown significantly over the years since Victoria's death, allowing us to support a wide range of charitable causes that address issues related to elder abuse, domestic violence, and financial exploitation. Our work in these areas has been deeply fulfilling, providing a positive outlet for the energy and emotions generated by our traumatic experience. One of the programs we fund provides legal assistance to elderly people who suspect they are being financially exploited by relatives or caregivers. The lawyers who work with this program tell us that they see cases similar to ours more frequently than most people would imagine, though few of them end with such dramatic confrontations. More commonly, the exploitation continues for years until the victim dies or becomes incapacitated, leaving the perpetrator free to enjoy the fruits of their crime. Another program we support provides counseling and support services to families who have been affected by domestic violence or elder abuse. The counselors who work in these programs have helped me understand that Victoria's behavior followed patterns that are common among people who exploit vulnerable family members, including the gradual escalation of controlling and manipulative behaviors that eventually lead to more serious abuse. The twins have both become passionate advocates for elder protection issues, using their professional skills and personal experience to raise awareness about these problems and to support legislative changes that would provide better protection for vulnerable seniors. Sarah's work in social services has given her direct experience with cases of elder abuse, while Emma's background in psychology has helped her understand the mental health aspects of both perpetrators and victims. David's art has continued to explore themes related to family, trust, and betrayal, but his work has gradually become more hopeful and uplifting as our family has healed from the trauma of Victoria's actions. His most recent series focuses on the strength and resilience that can emerge from surviving difficult experiences, and several of these pieces have been acquired by museums and private collectors who appreciate their emotional depth and artistic merit. Rebecca has become an integral part of our family's charitable work, bringing her experience in social services to help us identify and support programs that are making real differences in people's lives. Her practical approach to problem solving and her genuine compassion for people in difficult situations have made her invaluable in developing effective strategies for our foundation's work. As I enter the final years of my life, I find myself grateful for the experience that nearly ended it prematurely. The knowledge that I survived Victoria's murder attempt through quick thinking and decisive action has given me a sense of confidence and empowerment that I never expected to feel at my age. I know now that I am capable of protecting myself and my family even in the most dangerous circumstances. The deepened relationships with my children and grandchildren that resulted from our shared trauma have enriched my life immeasurably. The love and support they have shown me throughout this ordeal have demonstrated that the bonds between family members can survive even the most shocking revelations and devastating betrayals. Most importantly, I have learned that my life has value and meaning beyond just the money I might leave behind when I die. Victoria saw me only as an obstacle to wealth, but my family's response to nearly losing me showed that I am appreciated and loved for who I am as a person, not just for what I might provide financially. This realization has freed me to focus on making the most of whatever time I have remaining, pursuing activities and relationships that bring joy and fulfillment rather than simply maintaining the status quo. I've traveled to places I always wanted to see, tried new hobbies that challenged me intellectually and creatively, and deepened my involvement in causes that matter to me. The tea service that played such a central role in that terrible evening has been donated to a museum, where it serves as part of an exhibit about domestic violence and family betrayal. I couldn't bear to have it in my house anymore, but I wanted it to be preserved as a reminder of how ordinary objects can become instruments of both attempted murder and ultimate justice. In its place, I have acquired a new tea service that represents hope and renewal rather than danger and deception. Each time I use it to serve tea to my family and friends, I am reminded of how precious these simple moments of connection really are, and how easily they could be lost if we take them for granted. The legacy of that October evening will live on in our family for generations to come, but not as a source of fear or division. Instead, it has become a testament to the power of love, courage, and quick thinking to overcome even the most calculated and dangerous threats. It has taught us that families can survive almost anything if they are willing to face the truth together and support each other through the healing process that follows.